And you can ask questions.
Okay, so I started recording. So the first thing I always ask everybody to do is just do an introduction. There's no right way or wrong way. You can do the 30-second or you can do the 5-minute, whatever floats your boat. I'm probably as laid back as you'll find as far as people go. Whatever, you can go as long or short as you like. Just give us a introduction that you feel comfortable with, and we'll go from there.
All right. Okay. So I'm Mesheril ManyFeathers. I grew up in Australia, was born in Australia, moved to Canada in 1983, I think it was. And at some point in there, I decided that I was in need of leaving natural allopathic medicine. I became a nurse when I left school, so I had a dream of becoming a doctor. Apparently, when I was 2, I said to my mum, I want to be a doctor and make people well. And I didn't think I was smart enough in high school to go to university, so I did the next best thing, which was nursing. But I quickly realised that allopathic medicine doesn't provide healing. It's people that I was nursing weren't getting better, and that was disappointing to me, because I did really want to help people and help them to get better. So after I moved to Canada, had my first child, who had a lot of sickness, well, not sickness, but allergies, which I suppose is a form of sickness. And doctors, the allopathic doctors, were telling me that I would just have to put up with, I wasn't going to get any better. He just have to learn to live with it, and that wasn't satisfactory to me. There was something that said to me, no, everything can get better. And I took him to a naturopath, saw somebody who was really involved in nutrition. And once I changed my son's diet, everything changed. He became a different person. He didn't have any more symptoms, no asthma. And I realized that nutrition was definitely one of the things that I wanted to study and become proficient in. So I lived at Kelowna, BC at the time. So I moved back to Vancouver, and there was a college there called the Wild Rose College of Natural Healing, and I enrolled to become a holistic therapist. But partway into the first semester, when we were doing herbology, I realized that I would need to learn a lot more about herbology if I was going to be practicing. And so I did a double diploma. I did the Master Herbalist and the Holistic Therapist diplomas. And so I studied, really every modality that there is. I know that there's a lot of different names of modalities these days, but when I look into them, they're something that had a different name, maybe a few changes, but they're really, there's nothing new under the sun, as the saying goes. So I'm really well versed. I have a big toolbox, you might say, of modalities, because I've always thought there's no one modality that helps everybody. So we need to have a broad spectrum of things to call on. My mentor, when I first started along this path of natural healing, was Native Canadian, and she taught me crystal healing. Was the first course that I ever took with her, and of course, but Native American, Native Canadian rituals and ceremonies and things were part of her life, so they became part of my life as well. And I was very drawn to that way of living. Really, there's some beautiful philosophies in the native cultures. I remember she took me to my first powwow, and I cried the whole way through it. I had come home. and I heard the drumming, I just felt like that some part of me had been missing until I was reintroduced to that. So it was a really beautiful experience. I had a number of spontaneous past life regressions when I used to do exchanges with her, and I had a number of spontaneous past life regressions. And Atlantis seems to be one of the common ones that comes up, or did come up for me anyway. But there were a lot of Native American regressions that happened over the years, and one in particular that I'll mention because it had such a profound effect on me. It still impacts my life, I guess you would say. And it was in the 1700s when the blue coats, and I'll use the term that actually came to me in the memory. So the blue coats were invading. I was a chief in one of the Oglaga Lakota tribes, and
Location?
The Snake River has a big connection, but we actually travelled.
But United States or Canada, or where were you?
United States, yeah. So
Right,
Snake River in is that Wyoming? I think.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, that has a strong connection for me with this lifetime, and my sense is that we travelled there for this for part of the year, and we're more nomadic than I think people might realise. We travelled around with food. We didn't just stay in one place. Anyway, there was a gathering of all the tribes, I suppose, a lot of the tribes anyway, when the blue coats were invading. And I suggested that we all work together to fight these people that were trying to destroy us. Yeah, yes. And this is going to get a lot worse if we don't all work together.
Sure.
And it fell on deaf ears, which actually wasn't the first time that I'd experienced that. And
but you were a man or a woman in that life?
I was a male, yeah. So I was a chief, but I was also and this is very uncommon. I don't know if I haven't heard of it before, but because I had psychic abilities, I was a seer. I was also the medicine man of the village. So I'd started out as a child as apprenticing with the medicine man, and my father was the chief. So when my father died, I became the chief as well. So I think it's a bit of an unusual situation because you typically had two different people with those roles. So there was a situation where.
Do you remember your name?
What
was your name in that life?
My name was
if you don't remember, it's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to. I'm just, if you come up with it, let me know. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go on with your story.
Yeah, I'm a bear, so it had bear in it.
Running bear, bear heart, whatever, something
bear, yeah.
Go ahead.
I've written a story, but it doesn't come to me right now.
I didn't mean to get you off. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No. So there was an event that happened where the braves of the village the warriors had been lured. We didn't know they were being lured out of the village at the time. And the blue coats came in shortly after all the warriors left. And they, I was attempting to call down Great Spirit to assist us. I mean, I was in shock. I'd heard that there'd been raids on villages, but this was my first experience up close. And two horsemen came down, picked me up, took me up to the hill overlooking the village and made me watch while they annihilated. I'm still emotional about it. because all the old people were there, the elders of the tribe, and then the women and children. So they just slaughtered every one of them in front of me.
The warriors were out of the village.
They had been lured away to go do battle with the blue coats somewhere else.
Sure.
Yeah. And well, what I found out later was that one of my own tribe had defected to the blue coats and had told them about me, and how that I was outspoken against them, and trying to get all the tribes to come together to fight them. So I had a name that was not popular, I guess you might say. So they actually did seek me out, and they took me to the fort, and I have looked up the fort, and I can't remember the name of it at this moment either, but they took me to a fort. They cut off my legs, like below the waist, and put me on a buckboard. I didn't last very long, but they put me up on a buckboard, and I remember people in the fort throwing food at me and saying, "You dirty, filthy Indian." And I still have a really strong feeling about that word, like even Indian, but we would call Indians. So that has a strong negative connotation for me.
Can I ask you a question about that life?
Sure.
Have you fully processed all the pain?
I don't know if I fully processed the pain because I'm still emotional about it, but I did process where the physicalized, the somatic memory in my body. I'm a pretty emotional person, so I tend to get emotional about a lot of things.
That's how you're supposed to be.
Yeah.
And people who are not emotional, they're the ones with problems.
Is a problem. I may be over emotional. I was certainly called oversensitive, and you're just too sensitive as a child, and that kind of stays with you as well.
I don't think there is such a thing.
I don't know either. I think it's a projection, isn't it? The other person has the problems, not us. But I do.
Anybody, I mean to interrupt you, but I think anybody who does not cry or cannot cry has a major problem. I mean, I've only cried like once as an adult in my whole life, but that doesn't, or not twice as an adult, but I think it's more of a problem when you're non-emotional than when you're over-emotional. That's my opinion.
Here's our form of release.
Sure.
So if you're, there are some people, and I'm looking at the human design way of looking at things. There are 4 different aura types in that system, and the majority of people have an open, enveloping aura. And then there's another group that I'm part of that we absorb the energy of everything around us. And so when we're in the presence of another person or even long distance like this, we're actually, our aura permeates into the other person, and we connect with the soul, we read the person, and people often feel very uncomfortable around me because they know I can see them. So I've experienced, that it's like an excessive, you take that sensitivity that we all are really born with and amplify that to a whole other degree, because it's not only me that I'm feeling and my own feelings, my own emotions. I'm actually feeling that of everybody around me as well.
You're an empath.
That's a bit of a challenging situation. I did know that as a young woman when I was learning all these different modalities. I knew I was more sensitive than other people, and I remember other healers used to say to me, well, if you're feeling the emotions and feelings of everyone else, well, you're doing it wrong. You're just, you're not closed off. You need to be not, discerning and not picking up the energy of everyone else. And I thought, that doesn't feel right. My greatest gift is the fact that I'm this sensitive and I can feel what other people are going through, their pain. I can feel where their pain is in their body and what's connected to it. So that didn't feel right, but I did know that I was different from other people. And it was only when I looked into human design that made a lot of sense, that I'm actually one of these people that has a different kind of auric field that is just open, and it's just, you know, absorbing the energy of other people. And what happens is, I'm energetically reading other people's energy, and I'm sending that back to them. And so initially, and this was something I experienced from childhood, and it was a very confusing thing, because people would love me to begin with, because they're seeing all the beautiful parts of themselves that they like. And then after time, as time would go on, they would start seeing their shadow and some of the things they didn't like about themselves. And as that started being reflected back to them, and so suddenly I hadn't done anything different, but suddenly people would hate me. I'm their worst enemy. So I'd start off, I'd be the greatest thing since sliced bread, and then all of a sudden I'm their greatest enemy. And as a child, of course, that didn't make any sense. But later I realized it wasn't about me, it was actually about them. That, you know, on that sense, you could think of, I think of myself, I suppose, as a messenger. So I'm just here to provide a message to people. It's not about me. I have to give the message as clearly and purely as possible, but I'm only the messenger. I'm not the message. So whatever comes through me is a message for somebody else, and that's up to them to do whatever they need or want to do with it. So I really had to learn, before I even knew about human design, long before I knew about human design, I had to get really clear that I'm only the messenger, and that when people reject whatever comes through me for them, that's not about me. So it's really, you know, that was something I really had, and I still have to, you know, remind myself, this is not about me. When people are attacking or, you know, just don't like me or whatever, it's not about me. It's about them. It's about what's being reflected back to them that they're resisting in themselves. So that makes sense.
So when you walk into a party, do you tend to do your emotions tend to become the emotions of the party, or do your emotions tend to change the party to what you're at when you walk in? Do you generally pull what other people around you, a group of people, and you become more like they are, or do you kind of change the atmosphere to where it's like you are?
Yeah, I raise the vibration to where
So
I'm at.
change the party.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
but I have learned to not close off, but sort of ignore a lot of the peripheral, you know, emotions and things that are going on in the world around me, or in a given situation. You know, and larger groups, you know, I tend to ignore it as unless something specific happens. But I'll just give you an example of something. My son brought his girlfriend home, and when she came up to me, I burst into tears, and I knew it wasn't me. And I said to her, "You have a lot of sadness in your life, don't you?" And she started crying, and then she started telling me about, you know, what was going on in her life. So one of my early experiences of that was I worked as a staff herbalist at a natural pharmacy in Vancouver, and this woman came up to the counter and she was crying. I could feel this deep, intense sadness. She told me her father had just died. I said, "Let me go get you some rescue remedy." She wanted to buy the rescue remedy, so I said, let me go get you some right now. So I went and got it for her. But I was feeling the intense sadness, you know, devastation, really, that she was feeling. Gave her the rescue remedy. It helped it. But when I left the counter and was walking around, her whole family came in with her, and that overwhelming energy was really overwhelming for me as well. And so I think just naturally I started not switching it off, because I still feel it, but tuning down the intensity of my reaction to it, I guess is what I would say. So my first experience, even just right before that, was standing in front of a woman at a counter, and I had a band headache across my forehead. It wasn't mine either. And I said, do you have a headache? And she said, "Yes, I've got a headache right here." So that was my first sort of conscious experience of realizing it's clairsentience. I know people call it empathic. I think empathy or being empathic has a negative connotation, really, which is a bit weird. But that people that are empaths tend to be oversensitive and really intense with it. So technically it's clairsentience. Anyway, it's clear feeling. Clear feeling. So I guess I realized that I was picking up on other people's pain in particular, which was very handy when I was doing healing sessions on people, because I'd know where their pain was and I'd, go and clear it.
Sure.
You don't want to be in that all the time, but I do experience that I very often, if I go into a meeting or something like that, and it's a very low energy, I will purposely clear it and bring the energy up. A lot of it I don't do consciously, but the more consciously I do it, the more profound it is for the people around me.
So you're saying you do it automatically without even thinking about it?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
One of the things that I got very early on was that I have an auric field that cleans the auric field of other people, and I can't help that. I either resist it, and I did resist it initially, and I think the more you accept who you are, the better it is. So I'll be walking around, and as I'm going through a crowd or wherever I am, I'm automatically clearing the auric field of other people and spinning it off. And so when I realized that, I thought, well, I either go with it because this is who I am. I can't turn it off. So I either resist it and cause myself pain, because then I would be hanging on to whatever I'm clearing for other people, or I do it very consciously and create a way to spin that energy off and deal with the energy appropriately. So I've since created what I call it's just a silver cube, and it has vacuum hoses on it, giant ones, and I send all that energy into the cube and send it off to the universe, wherever, and get a new. So it's kind of like a recycling waste disposal unit, I guess you might say. So I set that up at some point to help deal with energy responsibly, I suppose. If you're going to do this kind of thing, we shouldn't just be having the energy floating around so other people can pick up on it.
So is that part of your therapies, or is that just something you do haphazardly all the time?
I do that. Well, as I said, I clean other people's auric field
all the time.
Anyway, but when I'm actually working with someone, or if someone's working on me, I use the hose to actually, remove the energy of the person, clear myself and make sure. I mean, I clean myself every day, but I don't want anybody else working on me that's got things attached,
right?
Which is the case. So I just bring the hose in and just release it all and get rid of it. Should I get back to the
go any direction you want, where. I personally want to hear everything you feel is important to tell me.
Okay. Well, the last part of that story is when I died, they cut me into little pieces, cut my joints and scattered me across outside the fort, because that was the most degrading thing that they could do to one of our people. And I didn't know anything about this, so I've read about that since then. That is, that's really a horrible thing to do. I mean, essentially, their intention behind that was to scatter the soul so that it wouldn't be able to return, to the blue road easily. So there was a very specific, sinister, dark reason behind that, is what I felt at the time. That this is not. They're doing this very consciously. So cutting us up and throwing my body out, to be fed upon, obviously, and then scattering the bones. Excuse me, that was my cat. Sorry. Was the most degrading thing that they could do.
You want some attention.
She does. She's never done it before. This is really interesting.
You're giving all your attention to the other guy.
I know. So yes, normally you'd be buried together whole, which helps the transition of the soul. So they were doing that to create as much disharmony on the soul level as possible.
Do you think that that actually was effective, and that when you went on from that life, did that hinder you in any way, shape, or form? I doubt if it did, but did it?
It did. It did in the way that when I went back to, because when I do regressions with people, and then obviously when I do them on myself, I'm working to resolve any of the energy that's been left behind, so that life is more harmonious. So when I did that for myself, I looked at what was my own pain in relation to that, and then what did my soul potentially want me to learn from that experience? And what happened is, first of all, I felt responsible for the death of my whole tribe. I was the chief. That was my responsibility to take care of my people. I hadn't done that. So I felt responsible for the death of the whole tribe. And I remember when I was in that place of healing that, I could see and feel all the souls of those people saying, look, it wasn't about you. This is what happened to all of us. You weren't responsible for us. You can let us go now. Because in a sense, I was hanging on to them and stopping them from moving on as well. So in that letting go for myself, I also let them go as well. But the other thing was that I said,
so you have processed a lot of this.
I have processed it, yeah. But the deep pain. Well, I think the deep pain that I carry is from a lot of different lifetimes. Certainly, just not from that one.
Sure, go ahead with your story.
On a soul level, the pain I have is really a soul level pain from the many lifetimes that I've had these kind of experiences. I guess I'd have to say.
So what do you mean when you say soul level pain?
Well,
what does that mean to you?
What does that mean to me?
Yeah, what do you mean by that? Soul level.
Go back and finish the one aspect that I got from it, and that kind of ties into it. So I said to myself at that moment of death, I will never, ever come back in a healing capacity again. So I shut that part of myself off, because I'd spent thousands of lifetimes in some kind of healing capacity. So not every lifetime, but certainly, majority of my lifetimes have been some form of healing. And so I shut that off. So that was 4 lifetimes ago. So I've spent 4 lifetimes since then. 1, 2, 3. I'm in my 4th one since then. This is the first lifetime since then of coming back saying, okay, I'll give it another try. I didn't say that consciously. I was just drawn into being who I am. It's like, this is who we are. We don't really, but I did avoid it for a couple of lifetimes in there.
So you've gotten past the problem with not being a healer. You're back into what you should have been. I'm back into
what I'm supposed to be. Yeah. So my very first spontaneous past life regression was being a healer in Atlantis. Working on people in temples. I also have one from Lemuria, which I remember very distinctly. And then, lifetimes in between there of being, Egyptian priest, Mayan, Aztec, lots and lots of different lifetimes where I've been a priest, mostly high priest. I was a high priestess in Lemuria, but mostly not very popular in any of my lifetimes either, because I've gone against the ruling class to not necessarily go with their ideas related to the off-worlders that are controlling everything. I guess we might just put it that way. they wanted my power. You know, the non-human controllers always want my power. So it's about any time I say no, well, you know, then they do away with you in a way that's going to be detrimental to the soul. So whatever we feel in any given lifetime, that just doesn't dissipate with us when we die. That deep pain or, you know, deep emotional experiences from your lifetime, we don't have a soul. We are the soul.
Right.
So whatever we're experiencing in our life, we're experiencing on every level. So we have, you know, 12 different layers of the auric field. We have, you know, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual bodies. We're experiencing everything on all those different layers and levels. So whatever we're experiencing, our memories, everything goes into the hard drive of the soul. So, you know, if you've had a lot of, you know, pain, that's carried into and remains on the soul level. So, you know, I've been told in a number of different readings, you have such a deep sadness, and it goes back, you know, thousands of years and thousands of lifetimes. I had one very strange experience with somebody I would call a warlock in this lifetime that I had, and I'm roughly doing the years, but I had over 5,000 lifetimes with this man where he had either killed me personally or gotten someone else to do it. And this was the first lifetime that I ever escaped with my life intact. So that's a pretty long history of, you know, people might say that's karma. I don't think of it as karma, but definitely where somebody has a grudge that they find me in every lifetime where we're incarnate together and does his best to destroy me and cause pain on different levels.
So how many lifetimes are you for sure that you know about?
I haven't really looked at how many, but if I've had 5,000 with one person, then it's in the many thousands. So I can say that I first started coming here 4 million life years ago in human years.
To Earth.
To Earth, yeah, 4 million years.
Do you remember any lifetimes that are not on Earth?
I haven't explored a lot, but yes, I had a fairly recent memory of one on Arcturus. I've definitely had lifetimes with the Andromedans. Andromedan and Arcturus, I think, you know, they're the ones that have sort of been predominant for me, but I have a connection with the Lyrans and some others that, you know, so I have connections with other.
So how many types of beings, which we would call aliens or something like that, do you have some personal direct connection with?
Mostly I would say the Andromedan, which would be the more healthy variety. But of the not so friendly ones, my dealings have been with greys, two kinds of greys, the mantids, or, you know, they're insectoids, and the reptilians. So the reptilians are the ones that really I've had the most dealings with. They do not like me at all.
So you've got experience with 6 different races, at least.
Plus the Arcturians. So I've had Arcturians come to me quite a few times as well.
So Andromedans, yeah. Arcturians, Greys, Reptilians, and who else? That's 4.
Arcturians, yeah.
I mentioned that. Let's see.
Yeah.
Andromedans, Arcturians, Greys, Reptilians, that's 4. Who am I forgetting?
The mantids.
Mantids, it's 5. I keep thinking there's 6, but anyway, okay, so if I give you the option to talk about anything, would you talk about Lemuria or Atlantis or one of the races? I'd like you to talk about both of those civilizations, incarnations, and all the aliens. I want all of it.
Okay. Well, let's do that. So I'll start with the memory then, because the memory I have of is a really beautiful memory, and I was in I'm a large stone healing temple. It's up on a cliff, but somehow they had it so that the ocean water came through. So they funneled the water up and through the temple around the tables. There's about, I'm kind of seeing it as I'm speaking about it. There was 4 tables, like large, maybe marble, definitely rock anyway, tables, I mean, for people to lay on for their healing. There's symbols all around the room, crystals in the corners, and the water would run through the temple and then back out to the ocean. And when I would have somebody on the tables to be healed, I would call up the dolphins, and that's probably one of my favorite memories, is that dolphin connection. So the dolphins would swim up the canal into the temple, and they'd use their song to as part of the healing for the person that was laying on the table. So we didn't only use our own healing energy or the crystals around us, but we also worked very close with the dolphins in the healing.
So were you a man or a woman, or do you remember your name?
Yeah, no, I haven't looked at that, but names don't mean anything to me really, because it's about the energy.
Right.
A lifetime, when I first came back to Australia, I had a memory of I was riding on a horse, long black hair. I was Native American. I didn't look at what tribe or anything, but I've got this long hair flowing back, feathers in my hair, and I heard a message: "You are many feathers, and you always have been," and that stuck with me ever since. I feel I have many feathers around me, and I really connect with that vibration. What that means is that I carry the medicine of all creatures, so I have access to all medicines. That's what that means.
What were you doing
So I was doing an exchange with somebody. So I was laying on the table receiving energy, and I just had this vision of riding on a horse, being told, like, hearing a voice, I suppose, that said, "You are many feathers, and you always have been."
So you were being healed at the time?
At the time, I was receiving. Yeah, so I was poisoned with a deadly chemical when I came to Australia from Canada in 1999. So quarantine Australia poisoned. I say poisoned me. I mean,
they didn't. Canada or Australia?
Born in Australia, moved to Canada, and then came back to Australia.
Okay.
And I came back to Australia through trickery. I mean, I suppose I'm probably glad I'm here at the moment, but all the craziness going on. But on one hand, I don't belong here. I don't feel connected to Australia in any level. But
where in Australia are you?
I'm in Queensland.
Which is where? North, south, east?
Northern. Yeah, so the southern part of the northern state.
So northwest, northeast?
Northeast. Okay. Yeah, I'm on the coast. Yeah. Right. It's called the Gold Coast.
So is it nice there?
It's summer nearly all the time. We have a bit of cold. We have a little bit of cold, but it's the reverse of the north of Canada. It's the exact reverse. So we get 9 months of summer essentially, and I don't know if I'd say 3 months of winter, but a little bit cold.
So if you had unlimited funds, and I said, poof, you're a billionaire, where would you live?
To a little island somewhere far, far away from everything.
You mean like Tahiti?
No, an isolated island where nobody knows anything about, and there's no inhabitants, and I can just go and hide.
So the world bothers you?
it's very disturbing what's going on right now. Yeah.
Oh, you mean with the corona thing?
I mean, well,
Or-
that's just an excuse for what they're bringing down. But yeah, sure, that's part of it, isn't it? But there's a very definite agenda behind all this.
Okay, well, go with Atlantis then.
All
Unless
right,
you have
so
something you feel more important.
a
Unless
few
you think
different.
you have something more important than that.
No, we can go in sort of in order of the progression of it.
Okay.
I remember a few lifetimes from Atlantis. So the very
Oh,
first regression.
before you get into that, there's two different rumors. Lemuria was at one time, then Atlantis was later. The other rumor is that they overlapped and they warred with each other. Which of these is true? They had no connection, or they
I
did
think
have a connection?
both. So Lemuria was first, Atlantis came after, but there was an overlap.
Well, okay.
And my experience is of teleporting between the two civilizations. I don't know about a war. I don't know that aspect of it. I haven't. It's possible, but that hasn't been part of my memory or reality.
Do you know what happened to Lemuria or Atlantis?
I do know what happened to Atlantis. I can get to that.
Okay, go ahead. Go through your story.
All right. So the very first memory was I was a woman in a healing temple again, very long. I remember I had a very long, thick braid, and that was stuck out for me because I have very fine, thin hair in this lifetime. And, I thought, oh, wow, to have that beautiful, thick, long hair, wouldn't that be amazing? So I was standing over a healing, a table. And the thought came to me because I knew what had happened, in the destruction of Atlantis. Many of us said that we would never use our healing powers again from Atlantis because the power was abused. That's really what it came down to. And so many of us said we're never going to use our powers again. And so in that healing, when I had that memory, I thought, but I would never abuse my powers anyway. So it's okay for me to reclaim that part of myself and the powers that I have, to the energy power I have to assist other people. So that was right at the very beginning when I started learning, to do the different healing modalities. So it was very appropriate that came at that time because if you're going to be working with other people, you want to be able to at least call on most, if not all, your healing energy, don't you? So I really felt, I'm not the only one that I've heard this from, but I really feel like we're reliving Atlantis now. We're definitely messing with DNA in the same way that they messed with it. So all those so-called mythological creatures, I mean, the word myth means a true story. So myth doesn't mean something fake. The actual meaning, etymology of the word myth, it has true in the meaning of it. So when you say myth, we think of it as something fictional, but the mythological creatures of the half man, half beast were real. That was what the Atlantean was messing with. They were combining the DNA of animals and humans together. In fact, they created these offshoots, you might call, that were part human, part animal, and they would grow appendages. These half beings would grow appendages out their arms and legs. And I first heard that I did an adult interest, adult educational course before I started doing any of the healing, going to college. I did this. It was on past life regression, and it's something I've obviously always been interested in anyway. But it was just an interest, I weren't learning anything. But it was run by a psychiatrist who had accidentally got into past life regression because he had taken people back. He was a hypnotherapist, so he would take people back to their childhood, but they would go further. And he said the common place that they went was to Atlantis. And he would always say, look down at your hands and feet. and they would describe these hooves and appendages growing off their hands and feet. And so when he got into it, there was this cross thing that was happening, which tied in then with what I got in my memory. So one of the lifetimes that I had, I was one of, my father was one of the chief scientists in Atlantis. And so I was from one of the wealthy families. And there was a large caste system. So, there were different grades of people. You had the workers, and then you had, the healers, and then you had the people, the scientists, and all those in between. So there's a broad, it didn't start out to be something negative, but in the end it was that, so that the ones that were the scientists and that were they classed themselves as better than others, it became a negative class system eventually. So the ones that were more wealthy, though, we had nice homes, we had slaves. That wasn't something that was done originally because people were all considered equal. So I had a servant anyway, and I never liked having somebody working for me, so I just used to get him to play music. But I remember that there was a large stadium where they would have the half human, half animals come in and fight to the death. That was entertainment. So that's one of the more disturbing memories that I have personally of that. And my father was one of the scientists they were looking at sound technology. But I had a client, so I'll go into what happened. So I had a client last year who felt responsible for the destruction of Atlantis. And what I got during the session was that it wasn't actually the Earth, that it was Tiamat. So, and that's just a name that it's related to the Sumerian. There's a planet that's missing between Mars and Venus that became the asteroid belt. You know that story?
I do know the story, but I don't know the two planets that's between.
Yeah, well, I didn't know anything about it, but this is what came up in the session that I was doing with this guy, that the planet, it's been called Tiamat. Tiamat was actually the soulmate of Saturn, and Saturn was the original sun. This is what I saw in the regression that I was doing with him. I actually got my own information as well, which is a very unusual thing. But it was a huge planet, and planets have souls as well. They're very large soul beings. So Tiamat and Saturn were soulmates. You might say they're the half of each other. And so when this sound technology, it broke the planet into pieces, and that was when this deluge happened. So I re-experienced it through the guy. He was remembering this. So when I do regressions with people, I'm actually there experiencing it with them. So I guess a lot of the people that were incarnate then had a notion that something was going to happen, because there was the elite, the scientists, not elite, they were scientists, were definitely looking at sound technology. I can't say what they were actually looking for, but whatever they were doing, they went too far, and they broke the planet. So it broke, a chunk broke off it. It shattered, in a sense of, that's the asteroid belt. I mean, it's not here anymore. It became the rings of Saturn. So there was already the Reptilians in particular. The Reptilians had colonized the planet that we're all living on, and that's where there was some wars happening between the humans and the Reptilians. So they had really infiltrated the scientists of Atlantis. They were working with them, whatever, and I can't speak of this as a memory, but there's some kind of battle that had been going on between the Lyrans and the Reptilians, and the reptilians had hidden on the planet, that we'll call it Tiamat, for lack of a better name. They had been hiding there, and then they had inserted themselves into the culture of the humans that were there. When the planet broke, and this is what I saw, is when the planet broke apart, there was a decision made that they would recreate the scenario of what was going on that large planet, on a chunk of it, which we call Earth. And so they created a hologram around the chunk of planet that came from Tiamat, and recreated so that we actually relived Lemuria and Atlantis on this planet that we're currently on. So they did a takeover. So they wiped everybody's memory because virtually everybody died. There was a deluge. They transported souls to this new holographic planet that they set up in the likeness of Tiamat, and they started over. So they redid Lemuria and Atlantis on this planet as a do-over. So the deluge that happened here wasn't the first time it happened, and it happened in a much smaller capacity than what had originally happened. You won't hear that. I've never heard it from anywhere else, but this is what I saw in this regression. And I also saw who's controlling everything, and I understand why that's all going on, and I'm sort of a part of that.
So you're saying that
I got a lot of information through this guy that I was working with that I didn't know before.
So you're saying that mankind was set up by the reptilians in Lemuria and Atlantis? Not the Anunnaki, not the Lyrians.
The other reptilians.
Go ahead, one more time.
The Anunnaki and the reptilians are one and the same. That's just another name. The Anuk.
So the Anunnaki are the reptilians.
Yeah, they're shapeshifters, so they can look like whatever they want. And of course, there's more than one. Not of course, but there is more than one species of reptilian as well. There's really tall ones, there's white ones, there's ones with wings and a long tail, like was portrayed in Jupiter Ascending. So there's a lot of different. There's not just one species. There's some that look a lot more reptilian, and there's some that look a lot more human, humanoid.
So you're familiar with Janet Kira-Lessin?
No.
Her husband wrote a book on the Anunnaki. I have not, or maybe 2 or 3 books on them. And she claims they're 2 different races. Now, I'm not saying you're wrong, and I'm not saying she's right. I have no idea. I don't have the slightest clue about either one.
Is of who? Of humans?
Say again?
She's saying there's 2 different races of reptilian or humans?
No. What she's saying is that the Anunnaki and the reptilians are not the same race.
Are 2 different races. Okay. All right.
Yeah, she claims she knows she's got a very large affinity with the Anunnaki. And okay. I asked her, I don't even know why I asked her the question, but I said, the Anunnaki and the reptilians, they're the same race or they're not the same race? I said the question just like that. And she said, they're not, they're 2 different races. That's what she said. Okay. Now, I'm not saying she's right. I'm just telling you what she said.
Yeah.
You can go listen to the recording yourself if you want.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, what people get is what people get. But, we also have to take into consideration that if you're working with a certain species, they're going to take your memories and your beliefs a little bit based on what they want you to believe, aren't they? And I'm not saying that's to me as well.
Said, I'm not saying she's right. I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't know who's right, who's wrong.
All I'm telling you
is what she said. That's all I'm telling you.
Well, let me tell you that another Lemurian story. So I was one of the high priestesses in a later Lemuria. And there were these birdmen. There were these beautiful, very tall, angelic-looking beings that came in on a spaceship, and it actually fits in with the biblical story of the Anuk, I think that is the word they use, and they saw the daughters of men, and they, they were fine, and they bedded them, essentially, mated with them. Well, in the memory that I have, these beautiful, large, winged creatures came in, but they didn't. They raped, the priestesses, and they very specifically chose the women that were connected with the healing temple. The one that I was associated, there could have been more than one, but the one that I was connected with. And where this came up is I had a student that I was training, like an apprentice, and she hated me with a passion that is just quite unbelievable. And so when I went in to help her to look at why she hated me so much, this is what came up. She was one of the priestesses in this time. She blamed me for the fact that she had been taken by these winged creatures and raped, and was holding that against me. But what I remember and saw in the regression is that they were shapeshifters, and they were shapeshifters that were reptilian, but they shapeshifted into what we call angels. And actually, if you look at the work of Pierre Sabac, he has done a huge amount of research on etymology and the connection between the Watchers, the angels, the reptilians, the jinn. They're all one and the same, and they came from two different planets. There's the Orion, and there's the Sirius, and even the Watchers, the shining ones, that all connects with Sirius. So he's done it through etymology and much deeper than what I'm talking about. So he's gone through all the ancient texts and looked at the correlation between all these words and how they overlap. So the shining ones, it relates to the ships that they traveled on. It's all connected. Those words are all connected together. Polyglottal, so the meanings overlap. So when you talk about the jinn or the angels or the seraphim or the cherubim, they're all one and the same, and they're all reptilians. The dragons, they're all one and the same, and that's what he's looked at as far as the words. And I've had that experience from a regression. So I would agree with him from memory regressions. He's looking at it through the actual words and their connection.
Okay.
So I know that they're shapeshifters and that they're very clever, and they're still among us now. And some of the experiences I've had with them, my first introduction into non-humans was through the reptilians. They were very specifically attacking me. And one of my early experiences was a friend I'd gone to college with. We graduated together. We'd gone to Victoria, British Columbia, to visit her parents, and she came. I'd been in her. She'd given me her bedroom, and she'd slept downstairs. And she came up about 2:00. She said, "I've just had this experience where I've been held down by something," and by something I knew what she was talking about. And for some unknown reason, I work intuitively, but I'd taken candles and incense and sage, and I'd taken all these crystals with me. She came, we spent the rest of the night pretty well awake, but the room was surrounded by reptilians, and I had to work really hard to keep them out because they were trying to come in and possess us both. So that was one of my first initiations into...
Hold on, stop for a second.
It was an attack. Yeah. So and I've had a lot of those experiences.
So don't go anywhere. Okay, so when you say they were outside surrounding and going to attack, were they physical? Were they non-physical? Were they physically on the ground? Were they astral? What form were? First of all, what form were they in? Second, which reptilians were they? Take me through the experience as if you were there like you're there right this moment. Describe it. I know obviously you had a little bit of fear, but with all the lifetimes you've had, you probably had a lot of self-confidence also. And I'm not trying to put words in your head and take you someplace. All I'm trying to do is get from you, put me in that moment as if I were there and we were there in that moment. Just so I get an idea of A, which reptilians, B, you can describe them, size, tall, any description you want to make, and then go from there. Do that.
Okay. Well, I'll just start by saying that I met somebody when I graduated. I started working in an apothecary when I first graduated as their staff aromatherapist, and then I also rented their room to do healing massage. So I met a guy there that felt like a long lost brother, and he'd been part of a group that was teaching people protection. They did meditation and stuff, but they also did what he gave me was a specific, protection is not the right word, but where you bring the light and dark together so you're not afraid of the dark. And so I had done this, I call it a ritual. Lots of people have done it before, so it becomes a ritual, and it becomes a rite. Anyway, so what you do is you stand facing the light. So this is what you imagine: you're facing the light, arms out, welcome the light fully into your being and embrace it. And then you turn around and you feel the darkness behind you. You turn around and feel the darkness, and you open your arms and you embrace it and bring it in and unite it with the light. So you unify them together, because in reality there's only one. Yes, we live in a dualistic reality, but there is a way to go beyond that and to create unity. So you're creating unity out of the duality. And so I did that a very, very long time ago. And so I feel fear. I have fear come through me, but here's the thing. We're supposed to have all these flavors of emotions. Fear, doubt, and anger have a bad rap of being negative emotions. Well, they are if you've got the energy so built up on your body that you're just living from that. But if you're clear and if you resonate with the frequency of unconditional love, then those energies, and they're only energy, those energies come through you as a warning. So doubt is a warning that something's not quite right in your environment. Fear means you better take notice something's very not right. It's like the next step of doubt. And then, of course, anger. If you haven't taken action when you felt fear, anger comes along to push you through. It makes you take action. So those energies are supposed to flow through us. And I had the most beautiful experience of that when I was doing a Reiki initiation with somebody one time. I was in a state of pure unconditional love, and I work to be at that state 24/7. And so but when I'm doing initiations, I'm very much in that experience, in that energy. And I could hear the people that lived in the house, along with, I was staying with somebody, but a friend had come over for the initiation, Reiki initiation. So I heard these two people downstairs fighting. And this fear came up from below and went through my body and left. And I thought, wow, that was an experience of how it's supposed to be. We're supposed to feel fear as an energy that just flows through us and tells us that something's not right. We're not supposed to hang on to it. We're not supposed to be in a fear state 24/7, which is what the majority of humans are in all the time, right? They're in that state of fear, and it's very specifically been created that way, because those beings, those non-humans that are controlling this reality, they feed on fear. They feed on all those lower vibrations. They want people in fear. That's why all this stuff is going on right now. to create as much fear as possible. You'd have to say there's a heck of a lot of fear going around right now. Anyway, so coming back to that experience, so I did feel, as you said, I felt a level of confidence that I knew what I was doing, but I could also feel the fear of, are they going to get in, like we're under attack right now. And it wasn't the first time I'd ever experienced a psychic attack. I actually experienced every Reiki initiation I went through, I experienced a psychic attack afterwards, and I would get it as a headache of something trying to get in through the top of my head, and I would get a headache. So I'm not new to psychic attacks. So it felt like there was, and it was more of an energetic thing. They weren't physical, but I would say they're astral. They're in the astral level. But they were definitely trying to get into the room to consume us, and I would say, it was a possession that they were looking to create. So I used my Reiki master symbols on all the doors and the windows and kept them out, and then I had a candle going. I did sage the room and just made sure everything was as clear as possible. And what they look like, tall, probably around 7 feet, and so not the ones that are the more humanoid, like there's large white reptilians that have a more of a flat face.
Yeah.
That were the ones that I would say look more like a reptile. So like a bit of a protruding nose. Like look more like a reptile. So yeah, not a flat face like a human. So they're humanoid because they have a head, 2 arms, and a legs. But they're definitely not the same species as the ones that look more humanoid. And they're like a dark brown color. They were those ones.
So they were dark brown. They're not green.
Not green. No. I mean, I don't know that I've experienced green ones. Most of the ones I've seen are more of a browny color than green. Yeah.
And how old were you when this happened?
I would have been 33, maybe.
And you were with a friend of yours?
I was with a friend that I had gone through college together. Yeah, we both. She did the master herbalist. I did the master herbalist and the holistic therapist degrees.
So why do you think they attacked you at that particular event as opposed to before or after that? What drove
it wasn't my first. Well, that was not my first rodeo, as they say. I had a lot of psychic attacks before. It was usually me rescuing other people. I'd often get a call, we're under attack right now, can you help us? And so I'd have to do some long distance clearing with people. But Victoria at the time was, we thought of it as the satanic capital of North America. And we had an experience in the daytime where all the shops that we'd gone into had this very low, very dark vibration frequency. So we went into a crystal shop, and even that was really dark and heavy and not a nice feeling. I didn't know about anything about pedophilia or anything that any of the satanic rituals. I knew nothing about any of that. I didn't have any memory of my own childhood or anything, but I just knew that there was some darkness going on there, and it was connected to the reptilians. Everybody thinks of it as demons. I mean, are they demons? Are they reptilians? I think it's pretty. I mean, there are demons, but they're kind of all connected. On one hand, much of a muchness, put it that way. But so yeah, I mean, as I said, I had a lot of psychic attacks from when I started doing the healing work. And if I go back to my childhood, I always knew I was being watched. So I didn't remember. I can tell you about my first abduction. So I did a regression to remember, because and I only remembered that I was an abductee about 3 years ago. but I always knew I was being watched. So I had that feeling. I was terribly afraid of the dark as a child. I was very psychic as a child, and I knew I was being watched. So I had a number of the symptoms of an abductee. Of course, as a child, I didn't know anything about that, but some of us are groomed from childhood to have these experiences, or for these beings to work with us, or whatever they do. We have a particular frequency that they're after, or a bloodline, or I think there's a number of different things that they're looking for. But my experiences, so I would say I was groomed, and I was groomed by Enki. So I have a very close, not in a good way, connection with the Annunaki known as Enki. And I was born on Good Friday. There's this whole connection with the Christ. He thinks of himself as the father of humanity. There's a lot of connection there that I look back on, and that I was being groomed by these beings. The angels, and again, come back to Pierre Sabac's work, the angels and the reptilians are one and the same. So those of us that were working on spiritual, I never considered myself a new ager. That was never, or a light worker. None of those things resonated with me at all. But I definitely believed in angels, and I thought I was working with angels when I did sessions, and I called on them, and all that, I would say, garbage now, but there was definitely a heck of a lot of trickery that was going on. But there was a point early on when I was, had experienced some of the psychic attacks, that I saw myself on a spaceship being viewed. And that's a really weird thing to see, and it's a really weird thing to even think about. But from early childhood, my very first memory of dreams is dreaming of spaceships in formation. And I have a recurring dream that I'd say started in early childhood. I can remember it from when I was about 5 or 6. I don't have a lot of memory of childhood anyway, for some obvious reasons. But I had this recurring memory of spaceships in formation. The early ones was spaceships in formation around the planet, like a grid, creating a grid. But the later ones, as soon as I would see these spaceships come over in formation, I would know that I was under attack, and I'd have to either be fighting them or helping people escape or something. But what I think that's a screen memory, that's been an abduction. So I don't know if you know that they very often put memories into our head to cover up the abduction, so we don't remember it. So my sense is that those memories, the recurring dream, is a screen memory. So when I went back, though, to when I did the regression to look at that very first abduction, I was 3, and there were little greys in the bedroom, and I felt that they had been grooming me for quite a long time. So they'd come in, they'd make me feel comfortable with them. So the abduction, though, I found myself floating above my bed. They took me out through the window feet first, and I could see behind me. I just sort of looked up, and I could see a large saucer, like one of the typical flying saucer spaceships. I could see that above me. We lived on a property, so there was no houses around, so it was pretty easy for them to abduct me without anyone ever seeing it. I saw a door open, and I was floated into the door, and then I was put on a table and strapped down. And then when I was strapped down, I couldn't move my head, so I had a strap across my forehead. My arms were strapped down, my feet, but I could just see the upper part of a body of a mantid, very black, praying mantis looking being. And I got the feeling that he was in control. So there were the little greys were the ones that took me onto the spaceship. A tall grey, I kind of think of them, they must be the doctors you know, the ones that do the procedures, not doctor, but, you know, the ones that do the procedures. And then the one that was in control was the mantid. It was all telepathic. And then what I experienced was they put all these etheric implants into my body to control me, you know, like monitoring and some controlling. So in the regression, I took all those out energetically, and, you know, to the best that I could. I've done a lot of sessions on myself where I've taken out implants. I think everybody has some implants. Some of us have more implants than others. The other abduction I knew about, being abducted on Mount Shasta in 1993. So I had been guided. I'd actually seen a spaceship. So I've seen a lot of spaceships and communicated with the beings on them. And they seemed to be mostly Andromedan. So they were tall blue beings. That's what I can tell you. But I worked with angels and ascended masters for a lot of years. And so they were allegedly, they were helping me. They would say, we're working on you at night, you know, to help you. And I'd seen a spaceship on the way to a conference. I went to the American Herbalist Guild conference. They have a yearly one in America. So I'd gone to New Mexico. There'd been a spaceship in South Dakota. I think it was South Dakota. And it followed us for quite a long time. We got messages that I was with somebody else. We got a message that we had to go to a little field on the side of the road and meditate back to back. And during the meditation, I had seen these blue filaments of energy light come down and go into my crown. And later when I read Bringers of the Dawn, I thought, okay, so that must have been something to do with activating all the DNA strands. That was what I thought, right? Anyway, so these beings guided me to go to, or gave me the thought that I needed to go to Mount Shasta on the way back from New Mexico. So I walked up the mountain, forgot to take water with me. I heard it. This was the first time of actually hearing a voice in this way. That carried on with me for years after that. The voice said, it's all right, it's all been taken care of. So partway up, there was a little stream. I got to have a drink. I got told what rock to go and sit on. And I sat on the rock and I disappeared. I literally disappeared behind a veil. So there was a screen, like a fabric kind of thing in front of me, and I disappeared behind that, and I woke back up again an hour later. I knew something had happened. I felt really different afterwards. And I went to a woman not long after that and asked her, so, you know, what happened? And she said, oh, you were taken inside the mountain and they did 3 days worth of work on you in an hour. So I guess I was there for 3 days, and then they put me back an hour after I'd gone and sat on the rock. So it looked like I had just been meditating there for an hour. So I wanted to know exactly what happened in the regressions. So I went back to that abduction, because it was an abduction. I didn't agree to it. You know, people think of these things as being something nice. Well, they're never for our benefit. They're always for the benefit of the beings that are taking us. So the first thing that I noticed was that these so-called ascended masters, there was Saint Germain, and there was the archangels were there, you know, Michael and Gabriel and Raphael and Ariel. There was others of the ascended masters were there, but they weren't ascended masters at all. They were mantids that were shapeshifters. And that was an interesting shock of, you know, the new ages, the people that are seeing all these, you know, angels and archangels that they're working with and ascended masters. That's not who they are. They're false light. And there's a guy who I spoke at a conference in 3 or 4 years ago on alien, any alien sort of or non-human experiences that you've had. And so I was looking for a diagram of the universe, of the light and dark part of the universe. And I didn't find that. But what I found was an article that was by this guy called Cameron. I don't remember his last name, but it was called Tricked by the Light. Oh, no, so why I never called myself a light worker. And I thought, well, I never called myself a light worker to begin with. And he talked about being tricked by the light. And all these so-called light beings are false light because they're actually dark shapeshifters. And I just had this incredible resonance of that. I knew that was true. When you know something is truth with a capital T, you feel it in every cell of your being. And I just knew that was right. And so that's why I had been really curious as to know, well, who actually abducted me and who had I been working with all these years. And yes, they were definitely not who they claimed to be. I think of this as a farm planet. We're being farmed. We farm animals for our sustenance. Well, humans are being farmed. Well, not humans. All life here is being farmed for the energy by another food source, another group of beings that are using us as a food source. And it's really interesting when you think of it from that perspective and look at what happens in the animal kingdom. I had an experience last year of a very up close and personal of feeding birds and how much fear animals actually live in. They live in constant fear. Well, that energy is being harvested. Some people call it loosh. I don't know if you've heard that word.
Sure.
But, that energy is being harvested by these non-humans who need energy of that particular frequency. So we all need energy to survive. They don't eat food like we do, but they do eat food in the form of energy. Just like the Matrix. We're batteries, but it's all life on this planet is providing that energy for them. That's the way I see it. I'm certainly not the only one that says that, but I certainly experience that. And when I was writing my talk for the conference, I had an epiphany that the chakras that everybody talks about, and I worked with 18 chakras for 25 years. And yes, I cleared people, and yes, I felt a lot clearer when all the chakras were all aligned and open and flowing properly. But when I got this epiphany that these are the implants that they are using to harvest our energy, and that when I got it, it just made so much sense that how would they be tapping into to harvest our energy if we didn't have chakras? And actually everything has chakras. Trees have chakras. Animals have chakras. Even crystals have chakras. So that's how they tap in to our energy field to actually steal that energy. And they are stealing. So I removed the chakras, and I have spent my whole life in some level of depression because of feeling the world's pain. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't experience that. And I have not experienced that ever since, that I don't pick up on the world's pain, and I'm not in that level of depression 24/7. I used to be suicidal. About 4:00 in the afternoon, I would feel like going and killing myself. As people came home from work, and they've had this hard day, at the office, and they're feeling really down, I was tapping into that energy in the afternoon. I just thought, I don't want to be here. So I'm saying suicidal, but I wasn't going to do it or anything. But I just felt like, wow, I don't want to be here. This is too much. So I used to feel that way every afternoon, and I haven't felt anything like that since I removed the chakras. I found a way to do it permanently. I'm not the only one that's actually removing them either. There are other people that are removing them as well. And my grandson was born without them. I removed them in the womb, spoke to his soul, asked him if he wanted to have that done. Obviously, you don't do anything against what the soul wants. So, yeah, that's a whole other can of worms, I guess, I opened. that you
So
may
that's
not
one of
have
your
heard of.
therapies now.
So sorry.
That's one of your
That's
therapies now.
It's one of the therapies, yeah. So when I do I do shamanic work. So when I do a session with people, if they want that done, then we remove them at the same time as, during the session. So one of the things I work with very specifically, I think this is probably one of the major things I think is the all important is bringing our inner masculine, feminine child together and uniting them as our inner family. We all have, you have a female side as well as a male. You're a man, but you still have an inner masculine and feminine, and we all have that, and we have a child, an inner child. A lot of people do in the past have done inner child work, but we also have an inner masculine and inner feminine. We have those qualities of a masculine and feminine, whether we're conscious of it or not. The feminine is our intuition. She's our wisdom, our inner wisdom. The masculine is our direction and purpose. He's the protector. The power actually comes from the masculine, but that trinity needs to operate together. And so I do a session where we go in and I have the person connect with each one of those individually and get them to look at them as an archetypal figure of, if you had your ideal man and woman, individually, what would they look like, and then what qualities would they have? And so we go through that and bring those into a harmony, and then put the inner family in their heart center. And I've never had somebody who couldn't visualize it, and I've never had somebody who wasn't really profoundly moved by the experience afterwards. A lot of people cry. They have such a profound, overwhelming sense of, oh, where's this been all my life? I've been waiting for this unity that I feel right now. So it's a deeply moving experience for people to get their inner family back together. And as a child, we have, there's no such thing as somebody who hasn't been traumatized. We've all had some level of trauma, even if it was just being smacked by your parent. It doesn't have to be anything intense, but we all carry some level of trauma. We also carry trauma from past lives as well as from our parents. So it's passed down through the generations as well as carried on from past lives. So we all have a lot of trauma on that level. So we all have a wounded child of some description as well. So that child is always looking for its parents. And, as a woman, we're often looking for a father figure, although many women wouldn't admit that. In a man, they're looking for somebody to protect them. Not necessarily a father figure, but somebody to protect them. And men are often looking for a motherly person to take care of them. So, that's just the way we're set up. But we're looking for our opposite because our opposite is missing within us. We are attracted to the parts of ourselves in another person, the parts of ourselves that are missing, because we want to feel whole. So intuitively and unconsciously, we're attracted to another person that's going to have the qualities that we aren't conscious of, but that are missing in ourselves to make us feel whole. And so, in a relationship, that those first weeks, months in the relationship, people feel very whole, and then it starts kind of going off the rails as you get into the relationship. But that initial thing is you're attracted to your opposite very literally, because that person makes you feel whole, because you haven't got it inside. But when you have it, when you have that whole within you, you're not looking for it outside of yourself, and you can have a relationship with somebody that meets you on an equal footing, as opposed to somebody that has those parts of yourself that are missing, if that makes sense.
Sure. So you mentioned Enki.
Enki, yes. Let me tell you about Enki.
Please.
Some experiences with Enki. When I read about the Annunaki, Enki's always the one that sort of stood out for me. I obviously didn't know why. but he's the one that always stood out. And I had an experience.
Okay.
I had an. Is that me? That's back?
That's my wife.
Right now? Oh, okay. Sorry. I had an experience about 12 or maybe 15 years ago, actually, where I was friends with a man who worked at the healing center I worked at. And I had done a session on him, and it was supposed to be an exchange, but I just did not get a good feeling about this guy. I can see the entities that people have connected to them, and healers often have, people doing healing work often have a lot of entities connected to them that they're passing on to the person that they're working on. You know, it's just that this energy gets recycled. I call them sentinels. You know, they look a bit like the sentinels from the Matrix movie.
Sure.
That's a bit what they look like. Well, some of them. Anyway, this guy had a lot of those kind of entities around him, so I wasn't going to let him touch me, but in a session. So he'd come to my house for a cup of tea anyway, and went on a chat. And while we were talking, he was saying about how he had let Lucifer free on the planet, and you know, it was this bragging kind of thing, which was very rude. But when we sat down to have a chat,
Hold on, stop. Hold on. All right, go ahead.
So while we were chatting on my lounge, he shapeshifted, and I have had many experiences before where people shapeshift into. I thought of it as their true form, but maybe not. But you know, I'd be sitting having a coffee or something with somebody, and suddenly they'd shapeshift into this non-human. So it wasn't my first experience with that. So I had no fear or anything about it. But he shapeshifted into this being, looked a bit like a kangaroo, but was grey. So a little bit of a snout. Essentially, he looked like a reptilian. That's what I would describe. And that's Lucifer, but that's also Enki. So Enki is Lucifer. That's my experience. I don't know if anybody else says that, but that's my experience, that the being that calls himself Lucifer is Enki. And when I started doing, so I've had people that come to me for exorcisms for as long as I've been doing healing work. So I never think of myself as a healer, because we can't heal anybody else. We can only assist somebody to heal themselves. So I'm a healing guide. So, you know, in that sense, I would also do shamanic work where I remove any entities that are connected to them. And I had a situation in the house that my sons and I lived in where I had to do an exorcism on the house because a demon, one of my sons could see this demon up in the corner of the room. Well, that was a thing with red eyes. I'm calling it a demon, but it was just an entity with red eyes. And I got very angry of like, what's this thing doing here, scaring my children? Well, they weren't scared, but I was scared for them, I suppose. Anyway, I did what I would call a house exorcism. Never done anything like that before. Well, my very next healing session was somebody that when I put my hands on the top of her head, I got, she's possessed. And, you know, you might think, well, how am I going to say to somebody, did you know you're possessed? Well, one of the courses I've done is neuro-linguistic programming. So that's very helpful of how to talk to people, to get them to tell you something that you need to know in a non-confronting way. So it turned out she actually knew she was possessed. Thanks for telling me before you came into the session, right? So anyway, I got the thing out of her, and no pressure. My very first exorcism was on a blue moon on Halloween, and I got the message that if you don't get this thing out of her now, she will be a lost soul for all eternity. So yeah, no pressure, right? And I think that day of a blue moon, which is the second full moon of the month on Halloween, is obviously a very powerful day for rituals. That's what I got anyway. So I got the thing out of her, had her sitting out in the waiting room, said to her, can you call somebody to come and get you? I don't want you to be alone tonight. You need to have somebody with you to make sure, you know, you're okay. And she said, I can feel the thing on the top of my head trying to get back in. As with the session, I didn't know what I was doing, but I did know, you know, I tapped into the part of me from many lifetimes ago where had done this in many other lifetimes. So I just knew what to do, but I didn't know what to do consciously. So she's sitting out there, this thing's trying to get back in. I said, I gave her a glass of water. I said, here, dip your hand in the glass of water. Didn't know why, but I just had the feeling that if there's water connected to the person, the entity can't get back in. Well, I've since heard people say that if you're like in the shower or if you're in water, entities can't cross water. So it is a form of protection. Anyway, she disappeared then. I said to her, go and spend the night in a church. I thought that might be the safest place for her. Anyway, didn't see her again for 2 years. And I often wondered what happened to her, because it was a pretty intense exorcism. And I saw her 2 years later, and she said, you know, you saved my life that day of the session. So I was a bit relieved that she was still doing okay and, you know, still good, I suppose. So I have rarely ever had a client that I haven't done an exorcism of some kind on, like removed entities. But when I had that client, the apprentice that I mentioned that hated me from Lemuria, she had a very specific kind of connection, which is a covenant. So a covenant is where you have 12 witches, warlocks, you know, a mixture, and they do a ritual, and they there's usually in ancient times they actually did have a cauldron where they would put potions and incantations and stuff into this pot, and they would take the body fluids of the person that they wanted to control, and they would put that into the pot with it. And what it was doing was binding your soul to them for all eternity, and that's the actual wording that they would use. So this woman, this apprentice, had one of these covenants, and somehow I knew how to remove that from her. But in the removal, I had to go into the den, you might say, of Lucifer or Enki to get the covenant back. So he holds, and this is, again, I don't know, I can't tell you how I know this. This is just what happened, you know, the knowing that came through in the session, that he holds all covenants. So, you know, any of the black magic rituals and stuff, he's hanging on to those agreements, vows, so on. So he's hanging on to that. So the covenant, I actually had to go in there, though, and get it. And it looked like a scroll. And I remember when I walked in, it was like I had to walk through a lineup of reptilian-looking demonic sort of creatures, and they bowed. It was the most profound, weird experience I've ever had. They all kind of put their head, I won't say bowed, but they put their head down, didn't look at me perhaps. I walked up to Lucifer, Enki, and said, I want it back, you know, on behalf of the divine mother of the universe, you know, by the power invested in me by the divine mother of the universe. I call upon the covenant of this person. I want it returned. So he would give it back to me as a scroll. And so I took it out, gave it back to the soul of this woman. And unbeknownst to her, I saw her let it go. So she didn't really want to be free from Enki. And she called herself Lucifer's daughter, which I didn't really take on as being something literal. But some of the experiences that I had with working with her, I would have to say that she was very much connected to Lucifer and what she was doing. So she gave it back. So I've had to go in, though, to that place in the astral and get covenants back for people quite a number of times. And one of the last times I went in, he said, "Oh, not you again." So I guess because I'm going in there with authority, it happens. But I realised, do you know Robert Stanley?
The name sounds familiar, but I can't say that I really know him.
I've watched a number of his interviews, and he talks quite a bit about Enki as well. And he had an experience early on with Enki of coming to him as a Jesus figure, which is what I would say I've experienced, and calling himself Father. And again, that's been my own experience. And so when he was talking about Enki was when I realized, wow, I've actually been groomed from childhood in this lifetime to be part of this, whatever they're doing with the abductions and all the ritual abuse and everything that I went through in early childhood. It's all been part of a plan that they've had for me in this lifetime to not allow me to be who I truly am. Let's just say that. So, the Catholic Church revere Lucifer as God. That the God of the Roman Catholic Church is Lucifer. They have the Lucifer satellites, the largest satellite on the what's the one called that views outer space? Telescope. Largest telescope on the planet is called the Lucifer. The hall that's connected to the Vatican was built to look exactly like a reptile, like a snake, and the Pope stands before the audience, before his congregation, over the fangs of a snake. So there's a very deep reptilian connection between the Vatican and the reptilians. One of the mass, you can look it up on YouTube, but one of the masses that the Pope was part of, I think it was 2004, if I remember rightly. There's a priest singing, another priest does the mass, but the Pope obviously is present. It's one of the Pope's ceremonies. He sings "Lucifer is God," so they definitely have that connection. Any pedophilia or anything that's going on the planet is very much tied into the reptilians. That's my experience personally, and that's they're the ones that actually want the blood sacrifices, and it's the reptilians that actually want that. So of interest, I was there's underground bases under a lot of cities. I think people have heard of the one in New Mexico. Shoot, the name's escaping me. That famous battle that took place.
Oh, you're talking about
yeah, it's the famous
Archuleta Mesa. Archuleta Mesa. It's that's New Mexico. I think that's the one it is.
There was a battle took place in the underground base with the military.
Right. Yeah. Well, that is the guy who used to tell that story. You remember his name?
No, but I can see him.
Right.
I've heard the story from him. Yeah, and other people. But there are a lot of different bases. But there's one below Yelm, Washington. So I've actually been to Yelm, Washington. So I was talking about it since I've had a couple of other interviews with James Bartley.
Sure.
And I was talking to James about
the Dulce base.
Dulce, that's the one. Yeah, that's it. Dulce. Yeah. Dulce, yeah. I was talking about Yelm, Washington, and apparently Jay-Z Knight, who channels some entity, has her spiritual base around Yelm, Washington, and one of the abductees, who was a researcher, that friend of James, actually infiltrated the Jay-Z spiritual thing and was videoing it. And what she learned is that the people that go there for their retreats were being taken down into the underground base underneath, close by where that where Jay-Z has her spiritual center. And they confiscated the tapes, but she was able to get confirmation that the base that's underneath there and you know what's going on, that they're taking humans down into that base. Well, I was talking to James about it, and that night I was taken to the base astrally, like in the dream state, and it's one of those vivid dreams that I was there. There's no question I was there on every level physically. You know, my face was held. I was made to watch the most grotesque, disgusting things that they are doing with humans as a food source.
Which base are you talking about?
So I'm talking about the base in Yelm, Washington. So it's an underground.
So in Washington State?
Yeah, Washington State. Yeah, Yelm.
Where is Yelm in Washington State? Do you know?
It's up the north part, close to the Canadian border.
Okay, so the Dulce base is, or not the Dulce base, the Archuleta Mesa with the which is.
Yep, yeah, I know.
Dulce base. That's in Colorado and New Mexico. It's across.
Right.
Yeah, Archuleta Mesa crosses those two states.
Yeah.
Yelm, Washington. Well, let me stop you. Do you?
I was there. You know, it was one of those very real experiences that, you know, it's like a nightmare, but I was there in person and experiencing that, and it was more like you want to talk about this here? Let me show you what's going on here, so you know, and you know, don't mess with us, kind of thing. But
what exactly did you see in your dream on the astral?
Do you want me to describe it? Do you?
Yes.
They had humans hanging upside down, like you would stake a cow or a pig. So you know the hooks through the heels, and skinned alive, and you know a conveyor belt that's taking humans into wherever it's one of their food sources. So they have energetic food that they get from us as well as they actually take humans as an actual food source.
So it's like what we do with chickens.
Like we do with chickens or pigs or cattle, sheep. Exactly the same. We may have got the idea from them, mightn't we? But if you think about the blood sacrifices, that's been going on for thousands of years. You know, the sacrifices that were going on in the Mayan pyramids. Apparently, the slopes of the pyramids used to run red. You know, they were doing ritual sacrifices to Quetzalcoatl and you know their different gods of the time. Well, you know those things have been going on for thousands of years for a reason. I had an interesting experience in Tulum, Mexico.
Hold on before you get into that.
Yeah.
So you believe there's a base under Yelm, Washington? That's where you were taken, right?
Yeah. That's where I was taken.
But you were on the astral plane. How do you know that's physically there and not that the base itself is now in the astral?
I was with James Bartley, and one of the people that he knows that's I think she's gone now, but an abductee had actually been there in person and had seen the base. Like, you know, there is definitely a military base there as well as, you know, an underground. Well, it's underground. So she had actually seen it. So
you were taken astrally to a physical base.
Yeah.
It wasn't on the astral plane. You just got there astrally.
Taken there yeah.
Your astral body was taken to a physical base.
Yeah.
Okay. Now I just want to get this straight because you know I don't want anybody to think think we're talking about an astral base. It's a physical base.
No, it's actually a physical base inside the planet. Yeah. So yeah, they have these abilities to do all those kind of things.
And do you know where Yelm is?
I have been there. I can't tell you exactly. I know it's below Canada. It's not too far across the border. It's not as far as what's the capital of. There's another place over the other side there, the eastern side of Washington State that I've been to. I can't remember, but yeah, I can't tell you exactly on the map, but if you look at the map, I'm sure you've got it.
No, I've got it. So yeah. I want you to understand, I used to live in Federal Way. Okay. Federal Way I used to go from Federal Way down to Tacoma to shop. Okay. There's the Tacoma Airport, and then another 30 miles, 50 miles south of there is Yelm.
Okay.
Okay, so now going with your the story you were about to tell me that I
right. Okay, so I don't remember what I was going to tell you. I will tell you. This is an astral experience. So when I did the regression to find out about the very first abduction that I'd ever had, and then I wanted to explore the one on Mount Shasta, I asked to do a regression of something related to my more recent abductions. And I found myself in a room in like a simulation. So I was in a flight simulation. But the next thing, so I was in the simulation, but then the next thing I found myself actually flying this plane, like literally actually like really flying it. And it was like a boomerang sort of shape, a bit longer than a boomerang, but that sort of pointy nose. And it's actually one of the spaceships I very often have seen in my recurring memory. So they're these, they're not flying saucers, but they are definitely, a flying ship. I believe that some of the, there's not just non-human anti-gravity planes, that humans have them as well. And I'm pretty sure they've had them for a very long time. So they have some boomerang shaped ones as well. But this was very different to what I think of the human ones, or the photos I've seen of the human ones. It's more of a wedge shape, and then the tail came out as a wedge as well. But very aerodynamic. So I knew how to fly. It actually felt like it was my ship. But I was with hundreds of other people that were also in ships the same. And where I found myself was somewhere in space. I can't tell you, somewhere above the planet anyway. And there was this chain link fence, for lack of a better term of, way of putting it. And the links are these huge, massive links around the planet, seemingly a grid that's keeping everything in here. And we were shooting at it to try and break the links. And I drew it afterwards because it was I've never seen a fence anything like it. The links, was very specific, the shape and the thickness and everything of it. And so there were hundreds of us. And what I saw was that we were time slipping, and that's the actual word I got. We were doing time slips into the past and into the future and the present. So we had people in all three, past, present, future, shooting the fence at the same time because they're looking for a way to get out of the planet. So I would say that we're stuck here, but more than anything is that the non-humans are stuck here. And that fits in with a story, and I don't remember where the source of the story, but that the reptilians were running from another species when they ended up here, and that they, just to make sure they didn't get off, that they were trapped here. And so that may be how they've been trapped here, is this fence that's been put around, and it sort of fits into the Emerald Tablets. Have you ever listened to the Emerald Tablets of Thoth?
I'm vaguely familiar with what you're talking about, but only in the sense that I've heard of it.
Yeah.
Details.
Well, in the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, one of the later ones talks about a grid. I don't know if he uses the word grid. I think it does, but basically your soul's trapped here, and that it's very hard to get out, and that there are these demon-like dogs that when your soul leaves your body at the moment of death, you'll end up, trying to get out of this fence or this barrier, and these dogs, demon dogs, will come and consume your soul if you don't skedaddle out of there, so to speak. So that's related to the Emerald Tablets. So I kind of think, on face value, that's probably just to scare us so we reincarnate and stay here in the cycle. But having seen this grid with my own eyes, I would have to say there is something to that. But I don't know that it's keeping us here. I would say more that it's keeping the reptilians and the other other non-humans here, and preventing them from escaping.
So I've heard rumors that the reptilians there is at least one race that they are afraid of, and I don't remember the details of what this race is or why the reptilians are afraid of them, or even if I have no clue if it's even real. I'm just telling you a rumor that I've heard. Now,
yeah,
if that's real and whether that fits in or any of that stuff, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, my memory, a very long time ago, like when I first started, I would say that I've never really been asleep completely. People say, they woke up such and such and, had these spiritual experiences. But I've always been having spiritual experiences. So it's not that I was ever truly fully asleep. I suppose, sleep comparative to what I became. But there was a point where I knew that I didn't belong here. I think I've always felt that. There's some of us that I think just feel like we don't belong here. But there was a point where I knew that I had been brought here from somewhere else, and that I had been part of what was called the Orion Wars. And there was a book that I read in the early 90s by a woman named Solara. She wrote a number of books. One was called Elan Ra, which is the three sons of Orion, Orion's belt. It's L-N-A-N and then R-A. And in that book, she described her memory of what was called the Orion Wars. And I knew that I'd been part of that in some capacity. So I did a regression to actually discover what had happened there, because I felt that somehow or other that was tied in with why I was here, why I didn't feel like I belonged here, that I actually came from somewhere else in the galaxy or in the universe, and had been put here against my will and was waiting for someone to come and get me and take me home. So I had actually connected with that part of myself that was not from here, so to speak. And I was humanoid, had a gold skin, no hair, other rainbow colors in with the gold, and didn't really feel that I came from any one planet particularly, but as I said, I felt a connection with the Andromedans particularly. So in the regression, I literally went home, and home for me is a dimension where there is no physicality. So we are individual soul sparks, but we're not individual. No, we're part of a whole. And what I saw was that some of us had chosen to leave that dimension and come into the lower dimensions to have more physicalized experiences. So, we had experiences throughout the universe, throughout this universe. Actually, multiverse. I have actually had experiences in other universes as well. But that was when I started coming to Earth. So that was about, in human times, 4 million years ago. So what would happen is I would come and have an experience, or a group of us would have experiences, and then we would go back home, and whatever we experienced, once we merged with the group consciousness of our dimension, whatever we'd experienced would become experiences of the whole, so to speak. So it's like, if something happens in your body, your whole body knows what's going on. So it's a larger whole. So whatever I experienced, all the other soul sparks experienced that as well. And soul spark is the word that I got. So I would leave and then take on some lower, more physicalized body that could change into whatever I needed it to. And so what I saw was that there were approximately 6 soul sparks from my home dimension who had decided that they wanted to become gods, because we created planets and suns and solar systems. Like, we were like a creator dimension, I suppose is what you would call it. That's not all we did, but that was part of what was possible from that dimension. So approximately 6, there was a group anyway that decided that they wanted to leave permanently and go off and become gods and just rule over and do whatever they wanted to do. So that was when a war started in the galaxy, and it started around Orion. So it didn't just pertain to Orion, but they consumed a number of the solar systems, or a lot of the solar systems, throughout the war. So it was a war of light and dark, essentially, because these beings had separated themselves from the light and from the true light universe. So where I came from is only light, there's no darkness. So in separating themselves and lowering themselves in vibration to a more physicalized upper 4th dimension, and creating war, they created darkness. So this war went on for possibly millions of years. It went on for a really long time. They took possession of different solar systems and the people that were part of it, which included the reptilians of Orion and Sirius, right? The Pleiadians is part of that. So there's a lot of solar systems that were consumed by them. So there was a point where those of us from, I'm calling the home dimension where I came from, said, okay, well, we need to put a stop to this, because we can't have a war going on forever. So we came to an agreement with these beings that they could keep the territory that they had taken possession of, and the beings that they had, provided they did not continue on with the war and trying to consume everything and taking any more hostages, so to speak, but overtaking any more solar systems and people. So we came to that agreement, and I was part of a large contingency that went to what we created was a field of overlap between the true light universe and this dark dimensional universe that they had set up. So we went to the field of overlap to have some kind of agreement, solidified that would be, making it more permanent, that, their word that they wouldn't be taking over any more of the light. And we were all captured. And so I was part of this large group of spaceships that were captured and taken into the dark dimension, the dark universe that we are now part of, and had implants and chakras, and had my body, my DNA manipulated, memory wiped, and then I was sent off to Arcturus to be trained, and eventually ended up back on Earth again. So Earth, for some reason, is a very strategic part of this dimensional reality that they took over. And so what I got, just to back up a little bit, in that original story where I talked about Tiamat and Saturn being lovers, I suppose, for lack of a better term, but, you know, soulmates. They destroyed the soul of Saturn, sent him off to the side, so to speak, because he was the sun. They brought through their own sun from Orion, which is the sun we now have, and then created this holographic projected planet that we are now on. But it is in direct alignment with Orion somehow. And the work of, what's his name? He's a physicist. I don't remember his name. I don't remember it offhand. He's done quite a bit of work around that and looked at, there's a direct connection, alignment between us here in this on Earth and some of the planets, I think connected to Sirius as well as Orion. I think that, yeah, there's a triangle that gets created between the three. So this is a pivotal point in their universe for them. So they brought in their own sun. I think a lot of people know that the moon is not a real, like, it's a spaceship that was brought here. It seems to me that all the moons of this solar system were brought here. You know, they look like they have cages underneath. I think there's a legend in the African tribes that there was a time before the moon. You know, they talk about it having been flown here. There's people that claim to have been to the moon and say it's hollow. You know, I can't speak for that, but, you know, there are different claims about that. But the fact is that I know these gods of this reality that we're in personally, and they know me personally. So there's been always a keeping an eye on me, so to speak, because they know who I am and what I've been capable of in, you know, before all this happened. Stewart, what's his name? Brett Stewart is a remote viewer. He did a remote viewing on Samsara, on reincarnation anyway, and actually connected with these beings with light eyes, that, you know, there's just light coming out of their eyes. And I thought, oh, I know them. And this is when, you know, more information came about who these beings are. And he said that when he saw them, they saw him, but it was like a gnat, you know, like you're nothing. You know, they sort of recognized his presence, but he was so insignificant that they didn't pay any attention to him. So that's who actually controls all this. And then you have the lower levels below that. So I think, you know, if we see somebody in charge, they're not the ones that are really in charge. There's always going to be somebody behind the scenes on another level that's going to be controlling things. So a lot of people talk about, you know, like David Icke talks about the reptilians being the controllers, but they're just the ones you see. They're not the ones that are really at the top. They are, you know, somebody else is pulling their strings, as well as the people that we call the elite, you know, the royalty, the bloodline of those Annunaki originally. I mean, that's who they believe they are. So that's a whole tangent that's different from, I think, from what other people will say, but that's been my experience of why we're here and what's going on here.
That's a lot. That's
a lot to take in.
It's a lot of information.
Yeah.
So when did you come to understand, when and how did you come to understand that place where you came from? How did you link to that in this lifetime? Or did you ever lose it?
No, I never lost the connection, but I think it was very thin and very veiled, I suppose, is what I would say. When I did that lecture, the presentation for the Close Encounters conference,
which is where?
It's a local Australian conference.
Okay.
It was in Byron Bay. I think it's 3 years ago, and I was one of the speakers at that conference. I had a lot of memory, like just writing the presentation triggered a lot of memory for me. And actually, it was James Bartley's presentation. He was the keynote speaker. Something he said triggered the memory for me that I was an abductee. But I'd already had some other memories, you know, that had started surfacing just from the writing. Often, you know, when you write, you get a lot of, it triggers a lot of memories, or it does for me anyway. So I knew that I was part of this Orion War, you know, the galactic war that had taken place. I knew that I had come from outside of this reality, and I guess what I would say is I have always been guided by that part of myself. You know, I had some very strange thoughts as a child that are not the kind of thoughts that a child that young thinks about. You know, I was about 7 or 8, and I remember thinking, why was I born to this family here now and not to some other family somewhere else on the planet? And I grew up Catholic. I remember, you know, sitting in the line up to go to confession and thinking, why am I sitting here making up stuff that I haven't done to go and confess it to some go-between? You know, if I actually do something, I'm going to go to the boss and ask forgiveness from God. And I stopped going to confession at that point. I think it was about 8 or 9 at that point. And when I was 14, my parents said I had a choice to either go away to boarding school like my brothers had done. So I was a very much younger child in the family. I was 17 years between me and my next sibling. So my parents said I could go to boarding school in the city that they had gone to boarding school all those years earlier, or I could go to the public school in my town. And I thought to myself, I don't want to have to deal with the childhood pregnancy, you know, the young children, you know, young girls dealing with pregnancies and drugs. No, I'm going to go away and put myself in boarding school so I don't have to deal with that kind of thing. So I think at 14, that's rather a profound thing to even consider. So I think, you know, I've always been guided by my soul, but I know that it's been that part of me that's from that other dimension that I've been communicating with, or has been communicating with me and guiding me. So when I was writing the talk for the conference, though, I really connected with that being, and, you know, got an image of what she looked like. Say she's not, it's not really a he or she.
When you say a being, you mean your true self? My
true self. Yeah, I connected more deeply with that part of myself. But in some of the more recent regressions that I've done, I've fully connected with and you know, embodied that part of myself on a whole other level that I hadn't before, which has been really beautiful. And the other thing was, you know, just knowing, one of the things that I have been really looking at for a lot of years is how to get out of the reincarnation or reincarceration cycle, as I call it, because I know I didn't choose to come here. I think there's some other people that know that as well. But I've written some articles on my website called Duality and the False Light. And I think there's some of us, well, all of us that were captured, as I said, you know, that were trying to do that treaty at the end of the Orion Wars or the Galactic Wars. We weren't born into this reality. I think of there being, there's more than one kind of human species. I think there's a number of different human species. You know, white people are not the same as black people as far as our origin. I think there's a number of different species that are that have been seeded here, so to speak. But I think there's two groups of humans. There's the humans that came from outside this reality, outside this dark universe that was created by those beings that I talked about. I call them the Omni.
You're talking about your true self.
It's being omnipresent. Yeah, I'm talking about my true self. The part of the universe where we came from. There's humans that were born into this reality, so there's still obviously a connection to source, the true source. So souls are born into bodies here, come from the true source, but they were born into this reality. They've never actually had any experiences in what I'm calling the true light universe. And then there's those of us that came from the true light universe put into this reality, and we all feel different. And I've talked to a lot of people who share that same feeling that I do, that just know they came from somebody else, they didn't choose to be here. So in some of my past life regressions, when I've died, I've gone to the tunnel of light. You have I've experienced that telltale kind of story that people have of, all these light beings are there to meet you, and they give you a review of your life, and then they talk you into coming back. They say you have a choice, but my experience was I said no, and I ended up in the womb of a woman, a Native American woman. So I would say no, we don't have a choice. And some people who do astral traveling say, don't go to the light when the body dies, and you go into your soul self. Don't go to the light. Go home to true source. That's our goal. If you go into the tunnel of light, you end up in the reincarnation or in a reincarceration cycle. So I would prefer not to do that myself. So I've been looking for a way, for quite a few years on how to get out of that. And it's interesting because, when I look for something, I often I get little snippets of, I'm guided to listen to this or read that. So, I do have a lot of help of when I set my mind to something, I've got a lot of help to create it. So I've had little pieces of information, and one of the last regressions that I did was how to get out of here, and it's not to go out when you leave your body. That's what because the same way that I go home when I have a regression is the same way to get out when your body dies. That's what I experienced.
Can you describe it?
So in the center of every so everything's made up of torus fields. You may know what a torus field is, but planets are torus fields or have a toroidal field. It's where it's like a donut, and you have the energy spirals around.
You're talking about the magnetic atmosphere of the planet.
Yeah. So but in the center of every planetary body, the sun, even us, we have a toroidal
energetic body.
Energetic, but yeah. So we have a toroidal field. We are a toroidal field, but in the center of that is a vortex. There's a vortex, like a black hole, in the center of every living being, and of course planets and suns and everything are living beings as well. So there's a vortex in the center of them, and so it's that vortex is how we get out. So back before all this happened, and I think that probably the beings that come here, I think that they are using the sun. We used to travel from sun to sun to get to different galaxies. So you go into the vortex of the sun, and you think about, it's all by thought. So you think which solar system you want to end up, and you'd end up in the vortex of that sun, and then you'd end up you go out into that solar system. So that's the way out, but it's it's to not go out of your body, it's to go in. So there's a spiritual precept that says nothing is outside of you, everything is within.
Correct.
You know, and it's the heart. The heart is the most important aspect of our spiritual being. Well, we have a vortex in the center of our being, and that's the way home as well, is to go into that vortex in the center of your heart center. So I talked about the chakras and removing them. So we have 3 centers, and this actually comes from, I have a memory of being one of the early humans. You know, perhaps you might think of it as Neanderthal, before the Homo sapiens sapien that we are. So they were an earlier species of human, and I had many lifetimes within that species of human. And they had 3 centers. They had a head center, which related to the pineal gland, a heart center, and then a belly center, which connected to the navel, and it coincides with the 3 brains that scientists now say that we have. You know, we know we have a gut brain, and our gut brain is creating a far more serotonin and, you know, all the neurotransmitters and so on. They're actually created in our gut. There's more created in our gut than is created in the head brain. So we have 3 brains. We have a head brain, a belly brain, a heart brain, and a head brain. And those are 3 centers. They each have their own vortex center that's connected to them. And so to me, that made a lot of sense when I learned about those ancient people and how they had, you know, they worked with those 3 energy centers. I remember thinking at the time, wow, that just makes so much sense. You know, I think everything is in a Trinity format in this reality, so it's another Trinity. Anyway, it just felt right to me. So that relates to, it's not that we don't have energy centers, but there's only 3. There's not the chakras. Well, you know, everybody has chakras, but it's not that we're supposed to have them there. They're implants that were put there as part of the control feature of keeping us in line. And as I said, that's part of the harvesting. But when you have those 3 centers in balance, it's a whole other balance, is my personal experience with that. And so the heart is the center of those 3 energy centers, right? And you know, that vortex of the heart center, the heart center is where we connect to our true soul self anyway. And if nothing is outside of us, well, it's all within that energy center of the heart. And so that's the way out as well, not to go out of the body at death. I think it's the Tibetans talk about going out through the crown. And, you know, the Tibetan Book of the Dead has a whole description of what you have to do when you get out of your body. And, you know, you see this flash of light, and the idea is to unite with the flash of light, which is your soul spark. And anyway, so that was one key. But I get from my own personal experience of when I've gone home, I've gone through that heart center. That's where I go. And when I asked to be shown specifically in the regression, show me how to get out, that's where I went. I went in through the heart.
So how many times in this lifetime have you gone home?
In regression, would be
Period.
3.
In any way, shape, or form, how many times have you gone to that universe, which is the true place of your start?
Till I did a regression last year, I would say never.
So you've done it at least once.
Well, I've gone there 3 times.
3 times.
3 times in regression. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So hold on. Stop.
Yeah.
Okay. So remember one of those times in this moment. Remember it. Okay. And take the audience, me and the audience, through what it's like to be there, as if you were there at this moment. What's it like there?
Okay, so the hypnotherapist that I work with, because I'm a hypnotherapist myself and a past life regressionist, he does it more to fit in with how I do regressions than his own. So he takes me, he just sends me there essentially. So I go into my soul self in this physical body. So I drop down into theta. I'm in that altered state, and then I go within, and I end up wherever I project myself to. So he's guiding me of where I'm going to go, but I'm within myself. I haven't gone out of my body. I haven't raised up or gone somewhere outside. I've literally gone within in that altered state to wherever I'm going to travel to, but I'm going inside. I'm not going outside, if that makes sense. So normally in my own regressions, I take people above the body and I take them on their timeline to past, present, future, lifetimes. Usually I'm working with past life regression, so we're going into the past, but we're going on a timeline that is above the body. But with this guy, it's kind of a combination of his own work and mine, is that instead of going out of the body when I do the regression, I go in to the heart center, connect with the soul, with the soul spark, and then I go to wherever I want to experience something. And in that case is I'm going in and I'm going home, and it's like a split second. It's not like there's a long traveling time and then you're there. It's that I go within. He says, now you're such and such, where you're having this experience, and I'm there. So it's an instant teleportation, I suppose, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I'm in, when I'm home, I'm aware of my own soul spark. So I would say there's a difference between the soul, and the soul is the aspect of us that is having incarnation. So we've had, if past.
Oops.
Sorry about that.
You lose power on your phone?
Yeah, no, somebody was trying to call me. I just had to get rid of the call. Sorry. So what was I saying? So soul sparks. So we have a soul spark that is our true self, I would say. Okay. So and the soul spark creates, every lifetime creates an aspect or a child of the soul spark that is then what we call the soul. So they're little snippets of the soul. They're still connected to the whole, but they're individualized souls of every experience that we're having. So, if you think of past, present, and future all one, potentially there's lots of souls that are having these experiences. So like in shamanic work, you do a soul retrieval. You actually gather up all the aspects of the soul and you bring them back here now to this part of you, and it makes you feel a greater wholeness. So you're bringing the fragments of your soul spark, your spark fragments into different souls to have experiences, so you can bring those back together to have a greater, more whole experience, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So can you in this moment remember exactly what he tells you to do?
He records it. I can't say I remember every little detail, but they're usually very profound experiences. So I remember a good majority of it.
But I mean, what I'm trying to say is, let's say you were told, we're going to give you a lot of money, and what we want you to do is take us, the audience, through the same experience as if you're as if we're on the couch at this moment. What would you say to us to do?
So, what experience would you like me to take?
So the experience where you go home.
Okay. Well, as I said, it's a. I have a trigger word that takes me into theta, and he says it 3 times, and I'm there. I'm in the altered state.
So where does the trigger word come from?
I create it.
You
and you don't share that with anybody else.
Okay, I'm not asking for your trigger word. I just want to know the mechanism.
So that the trigger word takes me into the theta state, and then I've given him the guidelines of where I want to go, what I want to explore in the session. So in the last session I wanted to know how to get out of this reality, this incarnation, and go home and not be trapped in the reincarnation cycle, and how to not avoid the vaccine that's going to be coming, that the whole world's locked down over, has nanotechnology and a RFID chip in it, and lots of other stuff. And what I get with that is that they're using black goo with it. That's part of their, I don't know if you've heard of black goo.
Yes.
But it's an alien AI sort of energy that is going to be injected into us and will, for all intent and purposes, lock us into this dimension and this reality. Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. a few seasons ago, they were locked into a computer simulation, and they were taken into an alternate reality. That's what they want to do with us. That's what's coming with these vaccines, that it's going to lock us into their reality that they want to create for us, and we will not be able to escape at the end of life. We'll just continue recycling forever. That's actually what Enki told me they want to do. I mean, I actually was told by Enki that's what we want to do. In fact, he told me very specifically they've done something in the matrix to make it harder to get out. Didn't tell me what, but I think this is what's part of the plan, is that they want this black goo to be integrated into our, they're going to be genetically modifying us with this vaccine. Bill Gates is be very specific about what's going to be in it. So, there is definitely a plan behind it. So,
I've worked for him.
I don't want to be part of that. I would rather die than be injected in that. So my feeling is I need to get out before that happens. I do not want to be injected with that and trapped. So I looked at, well, what can I do to protect myself from that? Well, there's only so much you can do, so many firewalls. We can create firewall. If you can create a firewall for a computer, well, we can create firewalls for ourselves. So I have a number of firewalls that I create to protect me on a lot of different levels, but I don't have a good feeling about this black goo that's going to be in the vaccine. I don't have a good feeling about that. So I would like to know how, this is what I said, I would like to know how to get out of here before that becomes a reality, and, we get taken over. Our soul essentially gets taken over. So that's what I asked. So when I'm sitting, I've gone into the altered state. He just guides me to go to the place where I'm going to get the information that I need. And it was kind of like, in Star Trek or even Star Wars, where they teleport. Not where they teleport, where they go through the hyperdrive, and the space becomes really fast. You see them, the stars speed up, and it's like they go through a wormhole.
I've done that. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, that's the experience that I have. Is it's like you go really fast, and then you're where you want to be. So I would say you're going through some kind of wormhole, and you end up at the other side. of where you've destined you've created we are so powerful when it comes to who we truly are as humans. I mean, we're not human. We are spirit having a human experience. The spirit part of us is so powerful. If we only knew how powerful we are, we could do anything. But it's mind. I've just got somebody at the door. Can I break for a second?
You can take as much time as you like.
Hi. I just saw the I'm just going to pump the thought and can you give me a couple of seconds to finish with that? And is that okay to you? Hello.
That gave us both a chance to take a break.
Okay. I'm going to have to go shortly anyway. I've got a guy here to look at my air conditioning.
Okay. Are you in an apartment or a hotel or a?
No, I'm in a townhouse. It's a complex.
Okay.
And I've got a little here, and I've got to get some things taken care of. So.
Well, hopefully we can continue this later.
Yeah.
I think your interview is the most fascinating one I've had so far by far. And
wow.
The last one I had wasn't half bad, So when I say that, that's actually a bigger compliment than you probably understand.
Thank you. That's lovely to hear. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. It was a lovely conversation. It was great. Thank you.
The world will soon know you, and you're going to be famous and rich and everything. You'll be able to go wherever you want to go. So let me go ahead and stop the recording, and you can get on with your life. I'll send you a link to where it's at, and we'll continue this another day.
It'll be fantastic. Thanks so much for your time. Appreciate it.
I think the same thing back at you. Have a good day.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Hey, you too. Bye.
Bye.